Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Today, we're going to be talking about the confusing world of recycling. Barbara Ochota and Diane Landry from Zero Waste are both here. And we're going to start with a video that tells us how recycling works and, almost as importantly, how it does not. And as I mentioned, if you are interested in piping up with a comment or question, just make a little noise or wave at me and I will stop the video and we can clarify what we're doing. I want to mention that Something to Talk About is sponsored. We appreciate sponsors in the world of nonprofits. Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which has memory care and independent living and soon assisted living up on Rolling Bay, is accepting residents, and they offer day stay and respite programs, and they sponsor this program, Something to Talk About. To learn more, call 360-594-1010. We also want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the people of the clear salt water, the Suquamish people who have taken care of these waters and lands since time immemorial. We honor them and we are grateful for their hospitality. And we're grateful for Barbara and Diane to be with us today to share this video that we're going to be talking about. So does one of you want to kind of set us up a little bit about what we're going to be watching?
I will. I'm a member of the Senior Center and on the board there, and I'm also on the Zero Waste Steering Committee and have been since 2015. And Diane Landry is the person who created at Sustainable Bainbridge's request in 2010, who got Zero Waste started. And she has been our fearless and unpaid leader for all of these years. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll get a wonderful set of information, varying information every month or so. It's a great newsletter. We never ask for money. We never share your information. We just try and do some education. So I sent this video. I came across it from one of the website groups that I participate in. And it's a 10-minute video co-produced by a group called Amber, and I can't remember, Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers, I think is what that is. And it's essentially for recycling businesses that are not for profit. And so that is not the case in our situation, but it's helpful to get an idea of the scope of a recycling facility and to actually see the process. And they do answer some specific questions in there. So that's all I had to say. Diane, do you have anything you want to add?
And the reason there are only 4 is because I think there are only 4 that exist in the United States that are nonprofit MRFs.
Yeah.
MRF, what's a MRF?
Material recovery facility.
Pardon?
It's where our recycling goes to get sorted. You know, the cans in the can bale, the paper in the paper bale, et cetera.
And,
Okay.
and our MRF happens to be located in Tacoma.
Yeah, one of the questions that I've had before is where does our stuff go? And its first stop is Tacoma.
Our recycling goes to Tacoma, right?
Port of Tacoma, yeah.
Okay, so with that, shall I start the
Please.
shall I, as Warner Wolf used to say, go to the videotape? Let's see if I can figure this out. There's what I'm supposed to be looking at. And here's, I love Zoom. Okay, share. There we go. There we go. And you should be seeing our video now. So.
The recycling model broken.
Recycling is broken.
Cities across the country are now re-examining whether their recycling programs are going to waste.
It's kind of a sexy headline. Recycling is alive, nothing actually gets recycled. But recycling as a system isn't broken.
Recycling is still saving millions of trees, gigatons of carbon equivalents, glass, aluminum, but plastic packaging is contaminating our paper. It's driving up the cost of sorting and processing. It's requiring us to pay more for disposal. We don't have a recycling crisis. We have a plastic packaging crisis. The original idea was reduce, reuse, and then recycle. And that got turned upside down by the packaging industry, who figured out that they could use recycling as a good storyline to what the end of life for their packaging is. But their goal is to sell more packaging. That's the bottom line.
AMBER, or the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers, formed so we could collectively be a counter-narrative to the corporate voice who wants to say that everything is recyclable.
For recycling to make a real difference today, we have to get back to the original values on which it was founded.
In the last few decades, most of the recycling industry has been bought up and consolidated by the waste industry. They're in it for different reasons.
If your primary revenue source is from landfills and incinerators, you don't have the same incentive to recycle. AMBER approaches recycling from the standpoint of creating quality feedstock that can actually then feed into other manufacturing processes and be made into something again. And that keeps trees in the ground. It keeps aluminum in the ground. It keeps sand in the rivers.
We're manufacturing commodities. We're not managing waste.
This is going to be made right back into cans. The energy that this represents is just a vast amount of carbon that is saved by recycling rather than digging more bauxite out of the ground and converting that into aluminum.
This will all be back on the shelf as a cracker or cereal box in about 4 to 5 weeks. If we focus on being as local or regional as we can with where we sell these materials, we not only have the environmental benefit, but we're creating local jobs and strengthening our regional economy.
You can create safe, family-sustaining jobs and provide a high-quality program to the community and at a reasonable price point. And that's what we're trying to demonstrate as these mission-based recyclers.
I probably get around a good 8 to 10 tons or so per day or better. Everyone feels like all plastic is recyclable, so they come out and they're like, hey, that's a recyclable. You're supposed to take this.
Recycling is an important tool to address climate change and the impacts of our consumption, but it's never meant to be the solution for everything we create. And for plastics in particular, it very rarely is.
As you can see, most of what's here is paper and cardboard and cans and bottles. That's what's really recyclable. But also in here is all kinds of other stuff that we have to sort out because some company made it and told people it was recyclable. And it's not. All right, Lynn.
Okay, Martin.
Good package, bad package.
No, not recyclable.
Styrofoam egg carton,
Bad package.
no go.
No,
Plastic pouch,
not recyclable.
no good.
Recyclable.
Natural jug,
One of
no
the
jug.
few plastics that is.
How about cardboard?
Yes, give us all the
White
cardboard.
cardboard, brown cardboard.
Any color cardboard. Aluminum can.
Yeah, super recyclable. More of these.
Clear plastic bag.
No, any kind of film or flexible packaging is a no-go.
Black plastic bag.
Even worse.
Brown glass bottle.
Excellent. Recyclable. Packing foam, not recyclable.
We see stuff like this all the time. Recycling arrows on it. Please recycle. Made with #1 plastic. Our end markets where we sell our #1 bottles to, they don't want this. It doesn't melt like a bottle. It doesn't behave like a bottle. It's not recyclable.
The arrows have a number in the middle. Those don't have anything to do with recyclability. It's a marketing campaign, it's really misleading.
Lots of this flexible packaging. It's gonna act a lot like cardboard, and it's gonna end up mixed in with the paper and contaminating the paper. Clean paper is the backbone of any good recycling program. It pays the bills for everything else.
The recyclers have to pay extra money to have people there to pull the plastics out manually, or to add a new $1 million piece of optical sorting on the paper line that we never needed before.
You can see how much energy and time and money gets spent pulling out plastic from the paper.
We have to shut the facility down for almost 2 hours every day, climb into the screens with box cutters just to deal with the plastic bags.
When we say the plastic industry is trashing recycling, this is what we're talking about.
This is material that came in to the recycling facility from people's recycling carts and is going to leave as trash.
This is going to end up being burned or buried.
Most of what's in here is material that wasn't designed to be recyclable in the first place. So we're seeing things like black plastic, styrofoam, red Solo cups, flexible pouches. How can we expect the average recycler to look at a piece of plastic with the recycling arrows on it and know that it's actually not recyclable?
This is not the average person's fault. This is the packaging industry's fault.
We're seeing industry push false solutions. They're framed and sold as exciting, magical technology that's just going to make the problem go away, which is really enticing.
Advanced recycling, also known as chemical recycling, changes everything.
Emerging and innovative technologies can repurpose these plastics into new and useful products. One promising alternative is converting plastics to fuels.
The solutions that they're pushing are either too expensive or too toxic or too complicated or don't pencil out. And so it's just a marketing solution.
The reason Amber is in the game is really to defend the definition of recycling. The important measure of any solution at all is, does it keep it in the ground? Ideally, we're heading towards less stuff, not a way to manage an ever-increasing mountain of stuff.
We need them to just stop it. Like, stop producing so much plastic. Find other ways to deliver goods and services. We can have a modern society without disposable plastic. There are 4 or 5 national policies that could make a huge difference on climate, on ecosystem destruction, on pollution, on resource conservation. If producers have to pay for and manage the end of life of a product, they're going to get much better at designing things that are actually recyclable, or maybe even eliminate a lot of unnecessary and problematic packaging. We'd like to see labeling laws that get rid of the chasing arrows, that require proof that a product or a package is actually recyclable in mainstream curbside recycling programs before it gets a recycling label on it. The only way that you can really get containers back at a high level to recycle them is a national deposit return system. Requiring manufacturers to use a certain amount of post-consumer recycled content is a critical way to ensure that we're actually recycling the things that we're collecting. Why aren't we subsidizing the reuse and recycling of those natural resources that we've already extracted rather than subsidizing more and more extraction?
This problem can't be solved brand by brand. I mean, can you imagine? Toothpaste, only if it's these 3 brands, it would be a phone book of a recycling guide, and it would change all the time. We need regulation and investment and support to shift the whole system. I can look out my window and I see a pile of 400 tons of material that, first of all, isn't going to go to a landfill or an incinerator. It's going to go back into the supply chain as really high quality feedstock, and is an aggregate of tens of thousands of individual actions, people that were doing the right thing, making the effort. Recycling is something that we can do. How we do it matters.
Okay. That
So
was
I guess I'd like to know if anyone has any questions or comments after seeing that video. Did you learn something you didn't expect?
Yeah, I've learned that my wife has been right all the time when I go and police the garbage and take things out and put it in recycling, like black plastic or yeah, I know now I'm like a no-no. But the one thing that really kind of bothers me, having lived in California for almost 40 years, is what's with why can't we do aluminum foil if it doesn't have food stuff on it and clean? You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff like that. So
milk cartons.
Milk cartons
We
with
used
the
to
wax.
recycle
Yeah,
milk cartons.
those kind of things. So I'm curious to see about whether the list gets expanded beyond number 1 and number 2, clear or white, you know, neutral plastics. But this is so far, thanks. That 10 minutes was well spent.
Yeah, and I think right off the bat, no number 1, no number 2, no number 3, that doesn't tell you anything. It's more, I guess, the form and function of it, right?
Right. What was the other thing? You wanted to know about aluminum foil, and there was one other type of item.
Milk cartons, milk
Oh,
cartons.
okay.
Which, you know, it is, the other thing I often hear is, these things keep changing. It's like you told
Well-
us that we could do this, and now you tell us we can't.
Right.
I hear that comment a lot, but if you think about it, they don't change that often. I mean, our current, I don't know if you can you see this? The latest flyer from Kitsap County came out a year ago last May, and the one before that was years prior. So while we feel like it changes all the time, think about a government organization making this stuff. They do not move quickly. But I know what you're talking about. We used to be able to recycle bottles with like plastic water bottles or something with the lids on, then it was off, and now it's on again.
Oh, is it
No,
on?
reverse.
I've been taking them
I'm
off.
sorry, I got
Okay.
it backwards. No lids now. So it
Okay.
used to be
Right.
no lids, then yes, and now no. And about the milk cartons, I don't know why we actually had that on recycling, because it's a multi-layered item. And there is no market in our region that we know of that can separate those layers. It may be true in other places, but we have to only go by what can happen here.
And I thought I heard you say the word wax. So the paper cartons haven't been wax lined for 30 years. It's a plastic lining, and that's what's hard to separate from the paper. It's too bad because it's a lot of paper in that carton, but our mills can't do that separation, so they end up going into landfill.
So what do we do to make manufacturers or people who provide us with milk use the clear plastic jugs that we can recycle? I mean, what's the impetus for them to change their packaging? I mean, doesn't that get to the crux of the situation where it's the people actually sell the products having to buy in, and how do we incentivize them to do that? I guess that's the big question.
Well, they
Well,
tried
I
to.
think- Go ahead, Diane.
They tried to pass a bill this past legislature called the RAP Act, which had an extended producer responsibility aspect to it. That was a big part of it, which is where the less recyclable your packaging is, the more you as a company pay to put that packaging out, in hopes that at the design end, they would create more recyclable packaging, but that did not pass this year. They'll try again next year. And that was a state bill, not a national bill. There
And
are
RAP
national bills that are trying to get passed too.
And WRAP is WRAP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Darlene, you had a question or comment?
Well, I want to say the 10-minute video was very well worth watching. It's scary and it gets me angry when I see what we're doing and how we've been manipulated by advertising. And I know many people might feel the same way. I have two very specific questions. I noticed that can you see the plastic from Amazon, It says Prime all over it. It's white and blue. Can you see that? You know, this one recognize. That's not recyclable. Is that correct?
It's recyclable at your grocery store. So where they take plastic film, you can put that envelope
Okay,
in.
thank you. That's helpful. And then my other question is, I did notice that Amazon, I do not order a lot, but they have been using a paper envelope, large envelope. Does not seem to have any plastic, but it does seem to have something else similar. It's shiny. Do you know if that's recyclable as paper?
Does it look like little, when you open it up, when you open it to see what those things are, does it look like little white balls?
You know, I don't think so. It seems almost more like, and I'm sorry, I didn't save that to show you, although this is not showing you the best anyway, but I just thought I would ask you and because this is something just in the last month, I've noticed twice that a package came, it was paper. So those are my specific. Then I'm also wondering about food waste. And I do not use the Bainbridge disposal food pickup or yard waste. But what food goes in there? Can meat go in there? Can cheese go in there?
Absolutely.
Okay, it can. It's full. So
Yes.
That's helpful because I do my own composting of vegetable and yard mass at home. But of course, I don't put food and cheese in it. And I wonder if I can do that at my own. I don't think I get enough heat to actually compost.
So you're asking if you can do it in your home composting. I'm not an expert composter, but there are two really good composting resources on the island. One of them is Ann Lovejoy at the Senior Center. So on her next Something to Talk About gardening, you might want to tune in and ask her about that. The other one is a man whose name escapes me now, and he is affiliated with the library and their composting information program.
All right, thank you, Barbara. That's helpful for my personal
And
question.
the other thing,
please go ahead.
okay, so you had a question about plastic film, and oh, here we go. Thank you, Reed.
I was asking about that top one because that one is, you can actually put that in recycling. It's not, that white stuff is not plastic. It's just some kind of glue and that'll come out in the recycling process.
And Diane, that's probably what you described to me, and I didn't realize. To me, it looks so much like just plain plastic, but you said it is not. So I can put that into the paper recycling. Okay, and then the other one that was there was the white and blue that Reed just showed. The second bubble line, that one cannot. That goes to the plastic recycling that I take to the grocery store.
Yep, the designated store drop-off locations. Yep.
Thank you very much for those very specific questions. That'll help me at home.
And the name of the other person is John Barut, who does the library composting. And I think the reason that people do not put meat and dairy in their compost piles is because if they're open compost piles, is because it attracts rats.
Yeah, what I have heard in some of our other discussions is that if you have one of those closed bins that you spin or whatever, you might be more able to manage that. Or if you have a worm bin, you can usually get rid of stuff faster that will. But if you're like me and you just have a compost pile that sits on the ground with a little screen underneath it, you're better off not putting things that will attract rodents.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Helps me in my own household. I hope we all learn from what I'm hearing today. Thank you.
And I had one other thing. This is about plastic film. If you go to the Zero Waste website, we have a document that has groupings of what is acceptable, what plastic film is acceptable, and what is not acceptable at our local grocery stores. So it's not all film is easily processed. For instance, saran wrap cannot be recycled with plastic film. So if you go to our go ahead.
Yeah, Reed, if you go to the reuse recycle guide and type in plastic film, you'll come up to that page that Barbara's talking about. So this is a really handy page on our site. So if you're ever wondering if you can or cannot recycle or compost something, just type the word in there and hopefully it'll come up in our guide. And if it doesn't, you can write to BI Zero Waste and ask about it. And then I'll do some research and then get it in the guide.
So where do I type the question here?
Yeah,
It's
well,
either-
you can just type it right there, plastic film, or you can scroll down, there's a plastic film section. There's the plastic bags and other film. So there's a long list you can, and then there's a long list you can't. There's some pictures in there too.
Diane, I would recommend to anybody, I'm new to your newsletter or your website, and I've just been using it for the last month or so. I watched you in action on the 4th of July, you and your team, and watched what you did in my little corner of where I was on the 4th of July. And it was really impressive. And so I signed up, and now I'm getting your newsletter or your online. I can go online and I see how helpful it is. It's more helpful than anything I've used in the past. So I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chris, you had your hand up. You need to unmute.
There we go. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So back in the 70s, I lived in Alaska, and there was a bottle bill that was waiting to be approved. It never got approved in Alaska, but Oregon had a bottle bill. Do they still have that, where you take your bottles and cans and you can get nickels and dimes? I know some friends from Oregon said they're nickels and dimes all over the street in Fairbanks here, Do you know if that still works down there?
I just want to let you all know that we are a resident of Bainbridge Island is one of the people to have established that bill when she was just fresh out of college, Mary Del Gale, if you know her. She's responsible for that bill, and which is still in effect. It was the first in the nation, and they've recently increased the amount of deposit you get back because, over time with inflation, bottle bills are the best way to get a return of material. And in the 10 bottle bill states that there are in the US, they get, between like 70 and 90% rate of return versus all the other states, including ours, just get between like 50 and 50% return. So it makes quite a difference to have a bottle bill.
So that's another thing that we might advocate with our legislators. for.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how easy is it for you to return bottles? I don't even know where I would go to get my deposit back. I know that sometimes milk bottles, you can bring them back, but like, your Coca-Cola bottle, your plastic,
They don't do it in Washington.
we don't do it in Washington at all. Is that basically what I'm hearing?
Right, and grocers, they tend to oppose the bill because it just is, when people return those bottles, they're sticky, they can attract flies, they have to find space in their store to take the stuff back, so they don't like to do it. What Oregon has done is establish these bottle drop depots, so separate from grocery stores, where people go and they just put into the machine their returns, and then they
Like the
get
picture
credit
we saw
slips.
in the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I would suspect, and that was part of the RAP bill, trying to get a bottle deposit too. And I've seen over the years in Washington State, there was a certain senator that would introduce it like every few years, and it never got passed. So I would suspect that's the way we would go. We'd try to copy the way Oregon does it because they're quite successful.
I have just one other question. Do our local
Uh-oh, Candace froze. Oh, you're back. Try again.
Okay, sorry about that. It was just a quick question about our local trash pickup and recycling. Can you hear me? Do they require that we put our trash in plastic bags before we put them in the barrels? Because that's what I've understood. And I'm kind of like, every time I use one of those white plastic trash bags, I cringe because I'm just like disgusted by it. I mean, I don't want to, but then on the other hand, I've been told that they don't like to pick up the trash if it's just sitting in the barrel. So, what is the
What's up with that, Rudy?
I mean, or is that a thing? And I'm just like, not knowing the real truth.
Dumping zero waste. There's another question for you guys. Do you have an answer?
Go
Barbara,
ahead,
do you wanna
Diane.
address that? It's a thing. They prefer it be bagged because then there's because I had a friend once who followed the trash truck, and that's one way we get litter on the street is from the trash flying out. So that's why they prefer that when it gets dumped, stray pieces could get out, and when it goes in the truck and then the compactor works on it, if there's a breeze or something, it could blow some of the trash out.
Okay.
So that's why they prefer it be bagged. But maybe if you can find, I don't know, bags that are only half full, or a lot of people I know just use makeshift bags to put their trash in. Like maybe it's a potting soil bag or something like that, so that they
Yeah,
don't
so you're
especially
In other words,
using it twice, yeah.
Yeah, using something that
Yeah.
you're already using that you got your
Mhm.
compost in.
Right, right.
That's clever.
So Diane, do you know, does Bainbridge Island Zero Waste know of recyclable large bag, well, not plastic, but bags that could be used? Is there a product you're familiar with that we could ask Town and Country or the Safeway to carry that we can access?
So yeah, that's one of the best uses, I think, of plastics that don't have to be recycled food grade plastics. Recycled content post-consumer, which means we've recycled it and it's been made into something else, post-consumer plastic, as garbage bags containing post-consumer plastic. So if you look, and I know at one point I remember seeing on the shelves of Safeway, there were, maybe it was Hefty, who had bags that were made of post-consumer recycled content. I don't know if that's still true. This was a few years ago. So I would say look for that. And if you don't see it, then ask the store to stock those. That's a good idea. Barbara looks like she's gone to get something that might show that. Okay.
Yeah, Barbara has done a good job of trying to find alternatives for things like toilet paper and the bin. We saw this picture earlier about the way that we're pushed crazily to buy our detergent for the washing machine in those big jugs that are uselessly plastic. Anyway, some pictures from you, Barbara, please.
Well, I just have an example. This is a 13-gallon sort of typical kitchen trash container size, and it is compostable. So it's better than buying pure plastic. It's more expensive, but this is what you can use for your garbage in your kitchen, non-plastic bag.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Barbara said she wouldn't mind if I disagreed with her, and on this I disagree, because those bags are not. I don't think they have the strength to hold real heavy stuff, and things can poke through there more easily, I believe. And then there's a question in the recycling compost world about, is it really is that kind of bag better than, say, a post-consumer a plastic petroleum bag that has post-consumer plastic content? Like, people can argue both ways on that. So in terms of its environmental value, which bag is better?
All right, we're back to diapers. Rewash or
cloth or
cloth.
Adult diapers or baby diapers, Reed?
Oh.
Well, I think it applies, but I don't know that many adult diapers are cloth.
Well, I think one big plus for cloth diapers is if there's a diaper service in your area that will come and take away your bag and bring you clean diapers. And I don't know that that's available anywhere around here.
Well, I haven't looked for a little while, but if I have occasion, I will. One of the things I want to make sure we talk about are the folks who will come and help you take away stuff that our own recycling will not. So Ridwell, for example.
Okay, can we defer that for a minute? Because there were two things that are kind of logical lead ups to that. So one is just, I wanted to talk briefly about wishcycling, which is when you put something in recycling that's not really recyclable, but you hope it is because it's plastic. I think after watching that video and seeing the volume and the pace of everything that comes through, wishcycling is a terrible idea. You know, you're putting an extra load on everybody that's working there to try and get what you hope would be recycled out of that mess. In my condo, and you know, I've given the information to everybody, I recently came across in our recycling bin a clear plastic cup with a clear plastic lid with a clear plastic straw in it. So somehow some people are still thinking that anything plastic is recyclable. And it really is only the stuff on the Kitsap County sign. It's these shapes. So I think that those weird little plastic bits that people recycle are wishcycling, but not a good idea. And then the other thing I wanted to say was about greenwashing, which is when businesses suggest or indicate, state outright that their product is recyclable when it is not. And I have a couple examples of that. I've got a plastic bag here, and I don't know if you can see it clearly, but it says the bag is reusable, recyclable, and biodegradable. That's like saying it's animal, mineral, and vegetable all combined. It can't be all those three things. And at the bottom, it says 49.2% biodegradation in 900 days under landfill conditions. Well, you know, if somebody thinks biodegradable means compostable and they put this in compost, they've just really done a big contamination in the compost stream. So you got to really look out for that kind of stuff. For instance, you know, a little thing like this plastic for my printer ink. You know, it's plastic, but it is not compostable because it's not the right shape. And then I have.
Is it recyclable though, Barb?
No, because it's not the shape of a recyclable object. It is plastic, but that's all you can say about it.
Okay.
So it's got to be bottled.
I'm sorry, Diane.
Tubs.
The shape has to be bottle, jug, jar, or dairy tub.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how
And
did
then-
shape, how did shape
How did-
get to be such a factor in the recycling world?
I think they decided that, I mean, this is just my conjecture and this is how I think about it. That's a really simple way to think about whether something is recyclable or not. If we're not using the numbers, you know, and the chasing arrows, how else can you figure out what's recyclable? So for these shapes, they're recyclable in our local facility.
Because, for example, the number one bottles are, but the number one clamshells aren't. So to distinguish between, so to not have you look at the number, that's why it's more useful to indicate the shape. Except I have to say I cheat because our current foodware ordinance says if you can't find something that's compostable, if it's recyclable in your current system, then you can use it. So for example, all the restaurants that serve really hot, like soup or something, they still use those plastic containers, which if you look on the bottom, it says PP number 5. And that actually falls into the same category as the dairy tub that the poster suggests. So that's where I use the number 5. I use the number to tell me it's okay for them, the restaurants, to use that polypropylene container because it's what the recycling system will take and recycle. But it's just hard to tell the general public all of that in,
Right.
you know, 2 words. So
Us amateurs probably aren't going to be able to figure it out. And so we should just avoid buying that stuff. Mark.
I have a question about wish cycling. I love the term, by the way, because I police our trash can at home. And so clamshells, even though it says number 1 and I cut the lid off so it's no longer a clamshell, I'm a bad individual for putting bad stuff into the recycling stream that should be out of there. Okay.
I would say there's a better choice to be made.
You're not a bad individual, but you're a wish cycling for sure.
My behavior is bad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
With
but this
all
would be a
due
good
respect,
segue. What?
with all due respect, knock it off, please.
Although segueing to
See, my
Ridwell
wife
with that
always
remark.
says, I don't listen to her. It's when I listen and I hear it from somebody else that all of a sudden it becomes a valid request. And it's a good idea that on my part.
Well, so we're glad you're here and she's glad you're here. So Diane, yes, you were going to talk a little bit about alternative streams.
Wait, I have one more thing I want to say about greenwashing. There's a frozen pizza that I love, and on the bottom of the box, it says, please recycle. Well, so what are you supposed to do with that? It makes you think, oh, this is recyclable, except frozen food containers are no longer recyclable here. So when you run up with a contradiction like that, rely on the Kitsap County sign. You just cannot rely on the containers.
I have one.
The packaging. Oh, go ahead.
I just have one other question, and this is just a generality. Styrofoam. Can we as a country like outlaw the use of styrofoam, period, end in packaging? Because no one takes it. You can't, you really don't, you shouldn't put it in the trash. It doesn't biodegrade. It's just nasty
I think you
stuff.
need to run for president on this one issue.
It drives me crazy that when I buy something, I open the box, and even if it's just a small piece of styrofoam, my blood pressure just goes way up. It's like, why are we using this product? Period. I mean, there's other ways to pad.
Because you can do terrorist, amateur napalm with styrofoam and gas.
You're getting off topic.
Sorry, that was just a way from left field. I'm not serious. I'm totally joking.
Okay.
Don't report me to the
We will,
DEA or whatever.
They heard those keywords in the NASA, the agency recording us. Yeah. Well, so the state has outlawed it for certain items, for, recreational coolers. I think this is the year, or next year is the year, it cannot be sold in Washington state anymore. And styrofoam cups, styrofoam plates, those can't be sold. There's a third category maybe, but it's still allowed for things like medical packaging, which is when we used to collect styrofoam, we would get a lot of those coolers. And then, you can't control what's coming, say, from China, a TV that's packaged in styrofoam. So it's a state ordinance, and there are other states that have the same ordinance. So it's been done for specific items. Oh,
Yeah,
and peanuts. Peanuts are not allowed anymore either.
I would love to
Styrofoam,
see a national ban, but we can't get anything done these days. So styrofoam is pretty low on the list. And if it helps decrease your angst, know that styrofoam is just 0.6% of the waste stream. So it might drive you crazy, but it's a really tiny part of it.
That's by weight. And so, we know it's a really lightweight material. So I don't know, volume wise, it's probably more, but yeah.
Okay, so we're getting to TerraCycle and Ridwell as alternative as businesses designed to deal with non-recyclable items. Diane, would you like to lead this one off?
Or I would say items not accepted in your curbside
That's
or
better.
transfer station, curbside recycling.
That's
Because some
better.
of the items you can take to the transfer station. So Ridwell is a doorstop service, and 863 households on the island subscribe. And every 2 weeks, you can put out certain items that they'll take, and they either find reuse homes for those items. Like one time they took freezer packs because a dog food company could use them. So they either rehome what they collect, or they give it to a recycler. And the reason they can do that is it's not going to a MRF. They don't have to separate out these different streams. They collect like a stream of plastic bottle caps, and they give it to number 5 PP, polypropylene recycler, who will take that material and recycle it. So versus at our curbside recycling service, if you put in a bottle cap, it's going to go to the landfill because it's so tiny and it can't make it through that separation process you saw in the movie. So so there's a niche for that kind of recycling. It's just, it's not, I don't know how scalable it is, but they've been expanding to different cities. They're having success.
Different states. They're in San Francisco now. They're in Minnesota. They're in Portland, they're in Seattle and on Bainbridge. So they're expanding their scope nationally. So I am a subscriber to Ridwell. It took me a while to consider it. I appreciate that I don't have to go to the grocery store with my plastic bags. I appreciate that I don't have to take my batteries to Ace Hardware. And the category I really like is one called threads, where they take clothing that's not good enough to donate. They take shoes that are really beat up. I don't know what they do with those. They have other rotating categories, but they've gotten recently into some plastics, and I'm reconsidering my subscription to them. So they are taking clamshells and they are taking crinkly plastic bags. And so I don't know how real a solution that is. So Diane, can you talk about your conversation with Jandel and the recycling facility that's not in the US?
I belong to a national listserv, and Jandel is an engineer and a national speaker on the subject of plastic recycling and really not believing in it. And she said, wrote me an email saying that there are no factories in the United States that recycle this PET, the #1 plastic, that it gets recycled just over the border of Texas in Mexico, in a community where at 3-4 a.m. in the morning, the residents can get for 1 hour water and then not the rest of the day. And this factory is there using a bunch of water to recycle, process the plastic waste that comes there. So, and, you know, it's claiming it's done in Mexico and not here because of our environmental regulations. So I've been watching news items, and there are 4 processing facilities going to come online in the US. And they said one of them is going to process PET. So the #1 plastic. So I don't know. That's, Barbara, why you don't want to keep subscribing, right? Because you don't believe in the.
Right. I don't feel confident about the ultimate destination of the additional plastic categories that they've added lately. So I'm probably going to cancel my subscription, because the other thing that does is make us feel like, oh, I don't have to think about my consumption habits because there's a place for this to go that will take care of it in an ethical way. Well, you know, I don't know about that. And then more, go ahead.
Well, I guess that could get us into what they mentioned at the end, which is it's not just, I mean, recycling is the bottom of the totem pole. Reduction is first, and then reuse. And so I think it's time we start thinking more about that. They brought up, and then I looked up online, they said, you know, we subsidize the fossil fuel industry. Why not subsidize the reuse and recycling? And so I looked up, it's billions of dollars every year that they subsidize the fossil fuel industries. And then this national infrastructure bill comes along, and there's, you know, like some millions set aside to give to, you know, recycling and maybe some reuse programs. So I would just say, you know, start thinking in terms of and supporting legislation that encourages reuse. And like Darlene said, she just got the latest Zero Waste newsletter, and that first article was about Weave Presents, a local organization that puts on musical events that have a social and justice perspective to them, and now a sustainability one, because they're the first group on the island to contract with our Cup, which is a company, reuse cup company, and they've been around since I think the 80s or 90s, and they, for musical acts, national touring acts, they would provide cups in a venue and collect those cups and wash them. And then you didn't have to worry about disposable single-use cups of any type. And so Weave Presents used that service this past Sunday. And, you know, it's expensive, but our single-use cups that we buy don't account for, you know, the externalities of environmental damage and the subsidies. So, you know, they paid like 35 cents a cup to use the service. They didn't have to pay for any more cups than they used. They were given equipment, that a bright yellow container that said, and signs that said, return your cup here. And that can be a successful model in an enclosed area. So I'm thinking like next year Chamber of Commerce could do that at the 4th of July, their beer garden, because that's an enclosed space. And I think more groups on the island should start thinking that way than when they hold events. Holly's on this. Hi, Holly. Holly just borrowed for her anniversary party from the Zero Waste Tableware Lending Library. There she goes. You know, instead of using disposables at her event, she used washables. So if we can all start thinking that way, I think we'd be better off.
It's classier too. Come on, people.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and then TerraCycle. Same deal.
Same deal, bigger scale. So I personally, and we have people in our zero waste group, let me say, who participate in zero waste in TerraCycle with great enthusiasm. So there's room for all perspectives here, but I personally do not. And one of the reasons is they were a defendant in a lawsuit regarding their lack of transparency, and they lost. And then so I know a little bit about that. And then I saw a BBC little special looking into TerraCycle for British recycling. And it just seems that it's not doing what it says it will do. It's not as easy to, in Britain, for instance, to drop things off at the correct locations. And they're also, I believe, contributing to greenwashing, because if you buy something that says recyclable at TerraCycle, and then you and how many other people ship your stuff to TerraCycle, whether or not it's recycled, the carbon footprint of shipping something across the country to an unknown destination doesn't pencil out. So I have just put TerraCycle in my no column.
So just to say, sometimes these things, there's a transition period for something becoming mainstream recyclable. And like, again, Jan Dell, who talked about the no PET recycling facilities in the US, she was part of this lawsuit. And they sued because these companies were claiming things were recyclable, but only by a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the nation. Because, for example, Colgate gives money to TerraCycle, and then we have a person in our zero waste group who you can, at the Marge Center, put any kind of oral product, care product, like the toothpaste tubes, the floss tubes, into our Marge container, and she will put them into her TerraCycle box for oral care products and return them for free to TerraCycle, who then gives them to a third party to get recycled. And TerraCycle can only do that because Colgate is giving them money to do that. And then Colgate can say, we're a sustainability. This is how we're a sustainable company. Well, so, they got called out on that by this lawsuit that said, well, it's not really recyclable because only this tiny, tiny percentage. Colgate gives them, like, say, $2 million, so they can only have so many people participating in this free program. Well, Colgate has now created a tube that is like truly recyclable. The old tubes were a combination of plastic, and then, there's that metal liner in there. So it's two materials. That's what makes it hard to recycle. One reason. So now I buy Colgate, and I have this fully recyclable pack, toothpaste tube. But our MRF, where our recyclables go to get separated, don't have the equipment that will pull that flat plastic tube, when I'm all done with it, off the conveyor belt line. It's flat, which means it'll probably go with paper bale. If it gets in the paper bale, it gets trashed at the paper mill. So there's this transition period where the companies are going, okay, we'll make our product totally recyclable. But then, as you were saying, what Mark Berger's wife,
Candace.
okay. So they have to even go a step further, maybe work with the MRFs now which companies do, like with that crinkly plastic packaging. There have been trial pilots at MRFs to see if it can get pulled out of the MRF stream. But we did. I'm sorry, I'm not being concise here, but
okay.
it's just
I get your frustration. I can hear that it's like it's going to take time. And one of the things that was mentioned in the video was, there are 3 brands of toothpaste. Or those, how are we going to manage, and then only 3 places that you can recycle it. How willing are our lawmakers, in your view, Diane, to hearing from us on the general sense of we support all legislation that gets things out of the waste stream? Our current lawmakers, can we talk to our senators, our congressmen, will they please hear the call?
Zero Waste Washington is an advocacy group, and they really pushed hard for the RAP Act. And I was on some calls where they were saying how we think we can do this, and then we can't. And there's support for it, and but it's just there must be some big donors that the politicians want to please in the end, the reason it doesn't go through, because we have a Democratic majority, and you would think the Democrats would push this sort of stuff through, but it just didn't pass. And I'm not really sure which groups quashed it in the end.
I was also going to recommend consider joining Zero Waste Washington, because you'll get notifications about legislation, and you were asking about how do you influence, and that's a good way. They'll send out an email saying, can you support this bill? And then you know what you need to do. So it'll keep you informed and give you alerts as to actions you might take to help a bill get passed through.
And it really does work sometimes. Like they'll say specifically when to just go on. It takes less than a minute, vote pro. And then there are certain times in the process when, if they see a lot of pro votes, it can make a big deal out of it. Can influence it.
Darlene.
Thank you. Listening to your video at the end, the young woman from Amber, if I'm saying that right, AMBR, right? Her comment was, we need to shift the system. And we know any system, how difficult that is to do, but she outlined 5 different points. I didn't get to write them all down. I started writing too late, but truth in labeling, deposit return system, minimum recycling. I didn't get that all to shift from. I didn't get all 5 of those points.
One was extended producer responsibility.
Okay.
So
And
there are various EPR bills around the country that are, having trouble, but at least the conversations are starting to be had. So dear plastics industry, you're making all this crap and taking no responsibility. So the cost, both environmental and financial, is falling on all of us. You need to be responsible for this.
I think that the 5 points, as I heard them, are difficult to know exactly how to work, but at least in my letter of communication to our representatives, I can highlight those 5 points, and they might be they could be meaningful in my campaigning or advocacy for making changes to the system. I'll look for those someplace. Could you put those on your website from the video? I thought they were useful. Maybe I'm making something more. You're the experts on this.
So I will put the notes and a link to the video in this YouTube video, which will go up at youtube.com/BI Senior Center. And the name of the video is Chasing Arrows, The Truth About Recycling, from the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers. And I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there unless there's something that Diane or Barbara would like to leave us with.
No,
Well,
these were. Go ahead.
Just a quick thing for those 5 things they said. One was minimum content, post-consumer recycled content. And you can only get that from having a bottle bill. So you got to have the bottle bill legislation to up the,
Well, I thought this was a lot of great questions today. So thank you so much for attending this. And please talk about what you learned today with your neighbors and your friends, because we all need to be having these conversations a lot more than we do.